A new U.S. tax law has got Canadians with U.S. citizenship and even some snowbirds worried.
The law requires Canadian banks to now sift through accounts looking for anyone with connections to the U.S. It also forces the banks to pass that information onto the U.S. Internal Revenue Service.
CBC investigative reporter John Lancaster has been looking into this for us. And John, you found some Canadians who believe this could ruin them financially.
Yeah, Dwight, they're very worried. All this is called FATCA, or the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And essentially what it means is if you're a dual citizen, married to one, or have financial ties to the U.S., the IRS, the taxman in the U.S., may want to have a closer look at your assets here and even tax them.
She's waiting, watching, wondering if they'll come, too worried to be identified.
I'm a Canadian. I've been Canadian since I was born, so why should I give my information over to some foreign body?
She's not a criminal, just a Canadian with an American parent. In other words, a dual citizen. She's exactly who the U.S. taxman could be looking for. In July, a new U.S. tax law comes into effect. It's supposed to track down the hidden bank accounts of wealthy American tax cheats. But it's also ensnaring Canadian snowbirds, people who are married to Americans, and essentially anyone with financial ties to the U.S.
My accounts are facing closure. I might have my mortgage canceled. I could have all my accounts closed. I could have all of my RSPs and everything that I've saved up for my kids' education and myself to retire on liquidated.
Saying no to FATCA is like saying no to winter. Both will arrive.
Canadian banks will essentially become an arm of the IRS. They'll have to report you if they suspect you have American citizenship, a U.S. source of income, address, phone number, or driver's license.
If we were to be non-compliant, there's a great financial risk that the banks would face, and there's a great financial risk that their customers would face.
It could be painful.
I came to Canada in 1969.
Carol Tapanila grew up in the U.S. before becoming Canadian. Her disabled son was born here, but because she was an American, he is too. Half the money put aside for him could be taxed.
U.S. persons around the world will be toxic, and they will not be a commodity for hiring or having as a business partner, having for a marriage partner. Who wants a U.S. person if you're going to be subjected to what is coming up with FATCA?
More than 1 million Canadians and their families could be affected, wondering when the IRS will come knocking.
Our federal government here in Canada isn't a big fan of FATCA, but is expected to sign that agreement very soon, actually. In a statement today, they told us they are powerless to change U.S. tax law. Dwight?
So, John, how will this affect Canadians married to U.S. citizens?
Well, it really depends on your situation. For instance, if you haven't kept the Americans up to date with your yearly financial statements, they could come after you. So if you're married to an American or dual citizen, things like your RSPs, if they're joint, your joint savings account, all of that could be taxed heavily. Even if you own a home with a dual citizen and you're found to be in arrears, well, if you try to sell that house, they'll tax that as well. So massive implications. But it's going to affect all of us, Dwight, because the big banks say this is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to put a system in place to track all these Canadians, and those costs will more than certainly be passed on to the rest of us.
Unbelievable, John. Thanks very much. So for a comprehensive breakdown of what you need to know about these upcoming tax changes, you can find that on our website, cbc.ca/Toronto.